In the Saddle with Sheriff Richard K. Jones.
How's everybody doing today? I'm Sheriff Rick Jones and
Detective Dan Turner with the
Dan
Butler
Turner
County Sheriff's Office.
with the Butler County Sheriff's Office. He's a detective of over, 17 years?
I've been a detective for about 7.
But you've been at the Sheriff's
Office
Office
for
17.
16, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been here quite some time. He's one of the best detectives that we have, and I'd put him up against any detective in the United States, surely in the state of Ohio. This is our 6th or 7th podcast that we've done. We try to make these relevant to what's going on, and today we're going to talk a little bit about cold cases. And a lot of you that listen to today, this is a cold case that was that happened September the 9th, 1970, at a roadside park. In 1970, I was in like the 9th grade, or the 10th grade. So it's a ways back, and the technology is totally different. So there's over 30 interviews that have been conducted in the last 52 years. 30 interviews over that. Coming up on September the 9th will be the 52nd anniversary of this killing, cold case. The case was reopened in 2001 and again in 2017. And these cold cases are very difficult because at the time the technology isn't what we have today. And there wasn't any DNA taken. Fingerprinting was very different at the time compared to what it is now. People have cell phones, people can video, people are going to see this. We're putting this out to the media to try to stir interest. Someone is either alive now still or knows something, and this is how these cases get solved. And they're very difficult. The people that worked this case in the 70s are no longer here. And it's kind of unique. The detectives, you weren't even born yet, am I correct?
It was 13 years before I was born.
It's 13 years before he was born. And in all likelihood, when they worked it in 17 the same way, and in 2001, probably it might have been their grandfathers or their fathers. So these cases, we try to piece it together. A lot of the details are mostly all handwritten. The interviews and the techniques were different. They were kept in file boxes. There was no computer system at that time. And so these cases are very unique, and people like to watch these. And for all the detectives that are watching today, and to all the people that think they're detectives and like working this, it helps us. And we need information, and we can't do this without more and newer information. We need you to come forward if you know anything, or you suspect, or you may have known somebody that's talked about this. And we're going to have the numbers up, where to call, who to contact, and we're not going to let these cases just go cold. We try to reopen them, we try to redo them. There's TV shows, that's all they talk about. The United States is a very big place. We're here in Butler County, Ohio, is the 7th largest county of 88 counties in Ohio. We're roughly 400,000 population. We have 500 employees here. We have 1,000 prisoners. It's a very, very large area. We have 20 different occupations here, but we need your help in solving this case. And right now I'm going to turn it over and explain what took place. When did we reopen this case for you?
Well, I was part of the 2017 group, myself, and at the time Sergeant Tanner. He's now lieutenant. It's 3 gigantic boxes full of, newspaper clippings and evidence that they collected at the time from 70, and then they reopened again in 1974. So there was just a lot of things to go over that we had to, familiarize ourselves with, because we didn't, we knew very little about the case. So we had to go through and listen to all the old tapes of the recordings of all the interviews and all the typed out statements and all the handwritten statements, and that took us some time to just go through the sheer volume of things.
You don't realize when you look at this, it's actually a manual typewriter where they're typing this. And when you're looking at the tapes, what kind of tapes are they?
Just VHS, or not VHS, but the cassette tapes.
The cassette tapes.
Tapes,
I mean,
yeah.
and you had to really probably hunt and find a cassette tape player, probably.
We did. We actually did, and that was hard. That was hard.
So,
I think Walmart had one left. Or something.
One left,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
So,
was tough.
you think these cases are tough, but then when you look at the technology, like he was explaining, it's tough. You have to recreate. You have to put your mindset the same as it was with the detectives at the time, what kind of vehicles they had, what kind of rifles they had. The park isn't even there anymore.
Right.
So you have to recreate, try to imagine what took place. Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Well, no, just like you were saying, trying to get in the mindset of the detectives. It was you're reading the detectives' notes and you're listening to their interviews, and you're trying to figure out if the detectives really knew more, or if they're just trying to, they're just trying to use a technique to try to maybe get some information. So you're thinking, is that real, or where did they find that? So then you've got to go look back through all the notes to make sure that that was a real thing that actually happened, or are they just making it up to try to elicit something out of a suspect? So, and we had to discredit all of that. So it just took a tremendous amount of time just trying to go through and see what was real and what was not real. Try to get in the detective's head, like you said, to see kind of what they were thinking and where they found that, whatever they were thinking, to make them go down that path. And so we had to really try to get in their minds and try to relive exactly what happened in 1970. It's difficult.
Yeah, and again, a lot of you that are watching this today are going to see that a lot of you weren't even born. Like you weren't even born for 13 years.
Right.
So up to that point, and here we got somebody that wasn't even born, and they've been here 17 years, and they're working on a case, and they weren't even born yet. It's amazing how this works and the technology. Go ahead and explain. So when you guys got this case, and you were the sergeant at the time was Tanner, right?
Mm-hmm,
he's a lieutenant
correct,
now,
yes.
in 17, and they opened it then, and we weren't getting much. So now we're reopening it again, and you're working on it. So explain a little bit. I tried to explain a little bit. Go through the entire thing again of what took place and what witnesses said and what you have.
September 9th, 1970, at the roadside park, State Route 128. The park's no longer there now. It's not even a turnoff. I believe it's just grass on the side of the road. Two young ladies were out for a drive, decided to pull into the park. They both live nearby in Hamilton. Victim number one, who is now deceased, is Georg Ann Reiter. She was dead on arrival at the hospital, and her friend who was driving her car was Melvira Vorbroker. She was also shot in the back. She survived after several weeks in the hospital and surgeries and things like that. So all the statements that we have as far as the suspect goes is all from Melvira Vorbroker. Okay, so
Okay.
she was obviously the only one that saw anything, at that moment. So she describes a man that's dressed in a button-up collared shirt with a sport jacket over top. He knocks on the window with the barrel of the rifle. Melvira rolls the window down. He says something to the effect of, "Good evening, get out of the car, I'm taking your car. I'm going to need your keys." So as the two young ladies were getting out of the car, Melvira, in being nervous, dropped the keys somewhere in the gravel. This probably kind of irked the suspect, and he made them turn around and walk towards the dark section of the park. And as they're walking, he yells for someone over behind a tree and says, "Get over here and help me," as if there was two people. So as the two girls are walking, they're both shot. Melvira wakes up. She doesn't know how long she was unconscious. She wakes up, and she's obviously in a lot of pain. She hears her friend, Georg Ann Reiter, moaning somewhere, but she can't hear where. And she sees her car with the lights still on, and she looks down the road south on State Route 128 and sees lights coming. So she gets up, she runs to her car, she finds her keys on the ground near the car. She picks the keys up, starts the car, and maneuvers the car into State Route 128 and is able to stop a semi-truck driver. The semi-truck driver stops. Melvira rushes up to him and explained to him what had happened. So the truck driver instructed her to maneuver the car where the lights would shine down the way so they could find her friend. They finally spot her friend. The truck driver helps move Georg Ann's body to the passenger side of Melvira's vehicle. The truck driver says, at this point, I will follow you to the hospital. So,
keep in mind, you might be watching this, don't lose your thought, that people might be saying, well, why didn't they call for a life squad? They didn't have cell phones.
Yeah, we do get a lot of that these days.
So when you're asking, there was no cell phones. So that's a legitimate question to think as we're watching this. Remember, this is in the 1970s. And, rich people might have had cell phones, but I don't even know if they did at that point. I don't know when cell phones were invented. But I know I got my first one at Radio Shack in the late 70s, and I thought, my God, you plugged it into your cigarette lighter. But there was no cell phones, and that's why they put them in the car. And if there was a patrol, there was very little patrolling going on at that time. This population of this county was probably a third of what it is now. It's late at night. There's no traffic. The truck drivers are working the road, so they put them in the car, her car, and then they drive. Go ahead and finish your story, but I wanted to make sure there's no cell phones. You can't call the police or the life squad.
Yeah, she was very fortunate that the trucker came down the road. So once they're loaded up in the car, Melvira drives the car to Mercy Hamilton, which is no longer there.
No, it's a park now.
It's a park.
There's a lot of not here anymore.
There is, yes. Unfortunately, Georg Ann Reiter did not make it, and Melvira, like we discussed earlier, was gravely injured and ended up surviving after several surgeries and several weeks in the hospital. Another interesting part about this is sometime after 11 o'clock that night, as we were going through all the boxes of evidence and all that stuff, we came across a handwritten statement from a guy that was leaving Fernald, which a lot of people know Fernald in the county was a big, but what did they produce? I forget what they produced.
It was nuclear.
It was chemicals or something.
Yeah, for the military, I believe.
Okay.
And it's no longer there.
It's no longer there.
But it's a chemical site to where they have to store radioactive and nuclear stuff, but it's no longer there. But it employed a lot of people at that time, and it was probably at shift time change that this person was driving by. And go ahead.
Yeah,
with the story.
so he was driving home. It was a little after 11. I believe he said about 11:15, and he described the car parked right there where, the victim said that the car was parked with the lights on, just off the road, just inside the park, facing north, which was all correct, which is all what we were told. He said that there was a guy what looked to be wearing a suit, and he was pacing around the car around that time.
And that was a handwritten.
That was a handwritten note, and he's since passed away. I think this guy died in like 94, 96, somewhere in that time frame, so we can't go back and talk.
So what we've got is an open case again, and these are very difficult. A lot of law enforcement don't like starting these cases and doing these cases because a lot of the evidence is gone, it's been destroyed, people have come and they've gone. They didn't have a BCI, which is Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and these cases just were put in a drawer and in a file drawer, and they done the best they could at the time, but they had to work other cases. And new sheriff come in, new people come in. Back then, everybody got replaced when the new sheriff came in all over the country. And that doesn't happen today, but it happens all over the country. And then when you reopen these cases, this person's deceased, this person's deceased. They're going back, and you'll see them working cases on Jack the Ripper. And I mean, that was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to use DNA. I don't believe we have any DNA from the suspect. Was the rifle ever?
The rifle was never recovered.
But we have the bullets.
We have the shell casings, and we have the bullets that were removed from the victims.
And was it a semi-automatic rifle? Was it a bolt action, or do we know that?
In the report, it says a newer 22 rifle.
A newer 22 rifle. What that means is we have no idea.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that we need to know, but we know somebody out there has some information, and it's very important. We're going to put on the screen who to contact, what to contact, and we really need your help. Anytime you see these shows on TV and where they're asking for help, we depend on you, the public, to help us. This is in Butler County. What township was it in?
Technically, it was Fairfield Township. It's just one of those small little spots right there coming into Hamilton.
So
on 128.
On 128 is a small spot. Probably the houses that were there may not be there. They were there.
Way off the road.
Way off the road. This park was right on the road, though.
Correct.
It was like a rest area.
It was like a turnoff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What they would have is back in the 70s, they called them rest areas, but they were parks to where you could just pull in, park a car, get out, use the restroom, get a drink, stretch a little bit, and usually pretty well lit, best they could for that time. They weren't fancy restrooms, a lot of them were at all, but it was a place you could pull off the road if you had road trouble, car trouble. But again, there was no cell phones. So what we're asking again is we need the public's help in resolving and solving this case. And if you have anything, no matter how small it is, if you heard somebody talk about it or give some details up, give us a call. We need your help. You've been working these cases. Have you ever had to do one that's this old?
No.
What's the oldest case you had to work?
The oldest case we have at the sheriff's office goes back to 1953.
Is that the one that was hitchhiking?
This was, I don't know about a lot of them, but it was a Miami University missing student. I don't know if that rings a bell.
Yes, it does.
We have other detectives that work these cases. I don't know. I've kind of spent most of my time on this one here, but I do know that 1953 is the oldest one that we have.
Yeah, and that was a case where a student disappeared from Miami University, and no body was ever found. We've had that on several shows, and people have had theories on that. There was questions where this person was knocking on a door asking for help, might have had some mental issues. We don't know. We don't know much about the person, but when you go back to that far back, I was born in 1953, so it was right around the time I was born, and we're still trying to work those cases. And a lot of the people are no longer there. And when you look at the reports that were taken, back then when you done missing person reports, they wouldn't even look for people they would ask somebody, they thought they just run away, or they'll appear. It's not like today, after so many hours, you have to file for a missing person report. So don't think that we're not going back working these cases. Most police departments are all trying to work the cases, but the problem we have is you got to do what you got right now too.
Right.
But this case is getting a lot of attention. It's coming up on what anniversary is it?
52nd anniversary. And to answer your question, this is the second oldest case that we have.
This is the second
53,
one.
And then 1970 is the Georg Ann Reiter.
So we're asking for your help. If you can help us at all, we appreciate it. And thanks again for coming, Detective. And everybody, put your thinking hats on. If you lived in this area back then, or you live somewhere else like Florida or Arizona, keep in mind we need your help here in Ohio, and help us solve this case. Do the best you can. Good luck, and hope you enjoyed and got something out of this, and help us solve this case. Thank you very much.
If you have any information regarding this cold case, contact Detective Dan Turner at 513-785-1238.